I will talk about an external tool that my team and I have developed. We're a small consulting and development company in Switzerland. We're focused on Power BI, and we started building this external tool around a year ago called Measure Killer. Yeah, I want to show you today what it is all about, what you can do with it, also all the aspects of it, like what it can do well, what it cannot do well. I'm gonna try to be very honest with you and also talk about its limitations and where you have to be careful. But to start things off, I'm just gonna share my screen and go to our website. So you can find the Measure Killer on measurekiller.com. And everything is basically here, and you can also download it from here. We also have a paid version. I will explain later what the difference is between the free and the paid version. But generally, this tool is made to optimize your Power BI models, to make them smaller, to remove unused columns and measures. And in that sense, I think Measure Killer is kind of special in that it's looking at the report, meaning the report layout, the filters, the visuals and everything, but also at the model, meaning things that you have maybe part of your data model, your relationships and things like this. So it's giving you a kind of holistic overview of your report and data set. It can also handle multiple reports connected to one data set. And that's why basically the main functions are deleting unused measures, deleting unused columns, and also something that we're building out more and more is cleaning up your Power BI tenant. So we're at the end of this call, we're gonna give you a little sneak peek into the new version that will come out very soon. And we'll show you a little more about what you can actually do in your Power BI tenant. And also something that Measure Killer can do is basically give you a really good documentation or analysis of your reports. Yeah. Maybe instead of going through this, which is kind of theoretical, I would say let's just jump into my Power BI and let's have a look at a sample report like this here, sales report. We've seen too many of those probably. And we just have a couple of measures here. We have a few tables with various columns. The whole report is just these 2 pages here. Looks quite nice, but I don't know if anybody's actually using it. It's a sample report after all. But here now we can let Measure Killer run on top of this report, and then we can see what it can tell us about this report. So Measure Killer is a software you need to install. You can get it from our website. Here in the download section, we have an admin version. This means you need administrator rights on your machine. And this other version is the portable one where you don't need admin rights. The only difference between those two versions is that with the admin version, you can launch Measure Killer from within here, from the external tools ribbon. For that, actually, you need admin rights on the machine. That's the only reason. So all external tools here means you installed them with admin rights. But if you don't have them, you can also get this portable version here. And then you just need to launch it and then basically connect to it. But if you prefer to get stuff from the Microsoft Store, it's also in there. So you have this link here, and then you can just download and install it from here, basically from the Microsoft Store. So if you have it, once you open it up, you have 3 different modules. And this is the things that we can analyze or we can take a look at basically. So either a single report and data set, which means like my sales report here, we can see it has like a 1.6 megabytes. This practically tells us that the data is also part of this data model, right? There's no live connection or anything. Everything is here. It's in the same file. But it could also be that we have like shared data sets, multiple thin reports built on live connection on a data set. And this is basically the other modules. And we will take a look at this later. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to either go off mute or just put them in the chat here. I think Olivier will monitor everything. Yeah, otherwise, let's get started. So I'm going to choose the single report and dataset. And since I launched the whole thing from within Power BI, it automatically fills in the port. That's what basically most external tools can do. Actually, I think we already have a question. Let's see. Yeah, so if I can mention if a feature is premium or PPU only. Yeah, so I will tell you when we hit the premium features, or I mean premium or PPU is basically when you have to pay Microsoft, but Measure Killer is general. Also, most of Measure Killer is free, but there's also a paid version of Measure Killer. So I will also say when basically I'm starting that, or I'm using parts of that. But generally, like what I'm doing here, it doesn't have anything to do with licensing. You just need to have Power BI Desktop and Measure Killer, of course, but that's free to install. So here, I need to select my report. So I also need to select the file. So we need the port and the file. That's maybe a little different to some other external tools, but we need this PBIX file also because we will get the information of all the visuals, for example, all the filters that you used, since we want to see if you use certain columns or measures in that report. And what's also really important to remember is that Measure Killer only takes a look at the metadata. So it doesn't read anything inside your columns, but it will look at the column name and things like that, the column size, but it doesn't care about if you have one row or 100 million rows. It doesn't matter. That's why also the speed of Measure Killer depends on the number of visuals, number of custom visuals, how many measures you have in your data set, how many columns, tables, etc. But it doesn't really care about the amount of data. So when I click on run here, you can see it says, oh, 50 artifacts. That means we have 50 measures or columns, like combined 50 artifacts in our data model. And in this case, it just took a second to load everything. And what do we get now as an output? You can see here that every row that I can see in this table is either a measure or a column. So every row is one artifact. And then the white stuff is basically the things that are used basically in somewhere in the report or in the data model. So for example, if I go to the age column, I can see, oh, okay, age is used in a clustered column chart on my customers page in the filter pane, but also it's used in the visual. Maybe we can take a look at this customers clustered column chart. You can see here age is in the axis, so this means it's used in a visual, but then also I have a filter applied on top of this visual. So those two things is the output, what we can see here. And it could be anything really. So we have also, if you use things in slicers, if things are used, for example, in a relationship. You can see here this customer key is used in the relationship of the fact table with dim customers, and it's an active relationship. So it also differentiates between active and inactive relationships. We can see, for example, a measure used in a different measure. We can find columns used in measure, so everything basically. And there's also some limitations. So now that I'm saying, oh, I can do so much, let's take a look at the limitations. Yeah, what does not work? Because we have to be very transparent here. You want to know where the limits are, right? So generally it looks at the visuals, custom visuals, calculated columns, tables, conditional format. So basically everything besides what is listed here, meaning there can be problems if you copy paste reports. It can lead to problems in the report layout, and then basically it can create two false references, and then things will show up wrong in the output. But this is really if you copy whole reports and rename some stuff, it can get complicated there. And then we have some very specific use cases in Power Query that just are out of scope. It's like kind of impossible for us to track some things. Some DAX expressions are not running on top of a column, meaning, I don't know, summing up some columns. But for example, it could be a table reference, like count rows, right? Or I don't know, all, or those table functions. If it, so Measure Killer looks at which columns, which measures are referenced somewhere. But if we just have a measure that is just doing a count rows on top of a table, then, well, would the whole table be in use? Would only one column be used? Which column? It's kind of ambiguous. That's why if you have, for example, only those table references. So you have a table, you don't use it anywhere. None of the columns are used. There's no measure built on top of that table. And the only thing you do is you build a measure with a count rows. Measure Killer will say this table is not used at all, because count rows, like I said, is kind of out of scope for us since it's a table reference and not referencing any column. So that would be one case where it doesn't work, for example. Calculated columns and calculated tables, they need to be deleted manually as of now. In the next version, will be released in 1 or 2 weeks, we will be able to delete calculated columns automatically. Calculated tables, actually, I'm not sure, Klaus. I think it's not in yet in the new version, right?
No, not yet implemented, but we are planning on it. Right. It's actually a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Delete whole tables, but yeah, hopefully in the next versions, right?
Klaus is our main developer, by the way, and he's joining here in case, yeah, he will actually show us the really cool stuff at the end. And yeah, he's the expert.
Far from that. Thank you guys for having us, by the way.
Something else that is really important is here it says several runs may be necessary to delete all unused columns and measures. And this is really important also. You have to think about, for example, annual, this is a bad example. If something is only used, if a column, for example, is only used in one measure, for example, yeah, then you will say, okay, this column is used. But what if that measure is not used by itself? Then in the first run, we would delete that measure. And then basically, if I run the analysis again, suddenly this column would be unused because it was only used in that measure I just deleted. So that's why, depending on those interdependencies, it's possible that you need multiple runs to remove everything from your model. And then there's something with titles and subtitles, the default ones. Yeah. So it's these specific things. We have not found anything else that does not work. And something else that is, I think, really interesting is this compatibility list. So we can see here what Measure Killer works with, like PBIX files, Power BI desktop, desktop for report server, direct query, composite models. But for example, it doesn't work with dashboards. Yeah, dashboards don't really exist as files. They only exist in the Power BI service. We cannot analyze whatever you're doing in a dashboard. Paginated reports and analyze in Excel. Those two things will actually come in the next version, but currently in this version, it's not there yet, and so on. So there is some stuff that is out of scope, and I just wanted to give you some input there. But again, maybe we can look at this table that Measure Killer generates, and we can see all the things that are unused and the things that are used somewhere. Maybe we can just take a look at, again, what type of usages Measure Killer can recognize. So, for example, months here, part of the calendar table is used in the column sorting, right? The month's name is basically the month is being sorted by the month's name, and this is showing up here as well. So I think it tracks almost everything. I wouldn't say everything because probably we have missed something, and even though currently I would say 1,000 to 2,000 people are using it every day, but still maybe there is something that we're not aware of yet. And it's always possible, of course. There's always one bug left to fix. So it's definitely not perfect yet. Of course, if you also have something that you're doing in Power Query, then it will show up here as an M reference, or something is used in an M expression. I'm doing something here with the order date in my Power Query. Okay, so just this output, if stuff is used or unused, I hope this is clear now. Do you guys have any questions regarding that? Just gonna make this a little bigger. If not, maybe we can take a look at this size column that I think is very interesting, very important. I can sort here and find the most costly artifacts that we have in our data set. So I can see here all the columns, right? The measures, they have no size. But I can see all the columns, and I can see, for example, the most costly column in my data set is not used. And of course, this is just 1 megabyte, but in the end, yeah, if I had a serious report, then maybe it might be 100 megabytes or even more. And yes, we can export stuff. This is this save results option here. So this is actually something that gives you much more information than what is in this table. And the row by row report is the best one. I think we can go to MK testing. So if I create this, it will basically generate an Excel file, and you can see here it put MK, then the name of the report, then we have a date timestamp. So I'm gonna save, and we can have it right here. And when I open this up, I can get a really nice table of all the artifacts, and every time an artifact is used will be one row. So I can see, for example, revenue is used 7 times, basically. And you can see everywhere it's referenced in the profit measure, things like this. And here, what is also really nice is you can, for example, see the DAX expression. Yeah, you can see all the DAX expressions of your measures or even calculated columns. We have the visual IDs. Maybe you can do some sophisticated stuff there in Power Automate to export those. We can see in what type of visual things are used. If I just go here, we have card visual, map visual, table expression, etc., etc. We have the visual title and subtitle here. So it gives you a very, very detailed overview of your report and dataset. And yeah, for example, I think this category is very interesting. You can see here, for example, I have active relationships, calculated columns, column sorting. Those are the things that I have in this test report, but there's also more things like inactive relationships and things like that. So this is the output it generates, and this is more detailed than what we can see in this table here. Hope that answers the question. Yeah, so what is the whole point of doing this, right? We want to optimize our model. We want to clean up our data set. And we have this button here to filter only the unused things. And now we can see that we have quite a couple of columns and 3 measures that are not used anywhere. So the question is, what do we even need them? And that's where Measure Killer can deserve its name, because it can kill those measures right there. And if I want to remove measures, I can either say kill all of them. I don't want to do that now, but I can also do select which ones to remove. And for example, in my case now, I can I can remove, I don't know, revenue and profit. And you can see here those 3 year-to-date measures. Those here on the right side, those are not used anywhere. So if I go to kill selected and I click on yes, you can see here there's a process starting in the background, boom, and it's already gone. And now it's asking me, should I run again? Just to see if something has changed. Maybe there's suddenly it could be a column unused because it was only used in one of those measures, right? But if the analysis takes a really long time, if you have hundreds or even thousands of measures or columns in your data set, the whole thing can take minutes, even 1 or 2 hours if it's a huge analysis. So in that case, maybe you don't want to run again, but in our case, it was a second, so we can afford that. And yeah, here you can see, boom, that's the second run now. I go to filter unused, and it's basically up to date with whatever we have in Power BI. So this is how we can remove measures. And since could be risky, right? And oh, maybe I forgot to keep a backup. We have this preview feature now to restore measures. And here I can now go to the 28th right now, and I can see, okay, I put 2 measures. I removed 2 measures. I can even see the DAX expression here, and I can say, oh, actually, profit is fine. I'm just gonna put back year-to-date revenue, and boom, it's back here. And the cool thing is it even keeps the formatting and everything. So it's a really good way. It's still in preview, but it's a nice way to put things back in case you you deleted something by accident and didn't have a backup. Of course, also only if you save your report, it will actually overwrite the old file, right? So if you even didn't save it, you can still escape by just not saving and getting out of here. So that's how we can remove measures. If you don't want Measure Killer to do it, you also have the option to create a C# script, and you can execute that, for example, in Tabular Editor, in an advanced editor, or any other tool of your choice. So measures is one thing. It helps us organize things. It helps us declutter our data set. But the columns are really the things that make a difference, I would say, because they speed up things. They will really make our model size smaller. And that's why the kill columns is really powerful, I think. And that is actually not automatic. So we still have to do something here ourselves. And this is basically generating a Power Query M code. So in Power Query, we have either remove other columns or remove columns. I'm sure you guys are aware of this. Yeah, so to remove the measures, you need to have the report open. Yeah, that's really important. If you do the online analysis that we'll show later, you cannot do it directly there. You need to, we cannot write to that data set in the service, really. We also don't really want to do that. We're only reading. So you need to have the data set open to remove files directly from Magicula. But to remove the columns, it's not automatic. So you have to, if you open the kill columns section, you can see that suddenly we get a drop down of 4 tables. Those are all the tables that contain unused columns. And they're sorted by the total size of storage, and that's uncompressed storage, uncompressed size that we can save. So what does that mean? Okay, our fact sales table, I can remove more than 1 megabyte here if I remove all unused columns. and that's going to be the first one to show up, and then it just goes down to the smallest one. So here I can say, okay, and we can see order line item and order number, those two columns. That's exactly what we can see here on the left. Those two have a 1.1 megabyte together, and I can go to apply. And what it does now, it will generate this M code, and I just copy this, jump into Power Query. And here I have my fact table. Let me just load this. Yeah. And what I do is I go to an advanced editor, I hit select all, and I just paste it here. And it's just, what it does, it takes the old code, it puts in a new step, columns removed by measure killer. And you can see here, boom, it takes out, as the last step, it takes out whatever we want to get rid of. And so it's a very safe way to remove unused columns. Of course, yeah, query folding, those things, yeah, that's true. It's not that smart, but then it's up to you basically to make maybe the query more efficient. But the good thing about having this as the last step is you can always remove it and just go back to the version you had before by just removing this transformation step here. So I can do this with all tables that have unused measures, and I just copy this code, boom, override it, and then just save it, and it will be gone from my model. Okay, so that's removing measures and columns semi-automatically, I would say, almost automatically. Any questions there, guys? Am I talking too fast?
No, currently no questions, or if there are any, Klaus is doing a wonderful job. So
Right.
he's handling all the questions in the chat currently.
Yeah. So what I haven't showed yet is this plot. Yeah, for data visualization nerds and Power BI professionals, this is not up to the standard we're used to, but it at least shows you how many columns and measures are used in your model right now and how many are not used. So it's just a quick chart. And then there's a Sankey chart. Maybe actually I can show this now. A Sankey diagram where we can see where the measures go, where they are used. Yeah, it's an experimental chart still, but yeah, maybe people will find it helpful for very complex or larger reports. So that's what you can plot basically from inside Measure Killer. And then we have those save results. I showed the first option here. The second one is very similar, but it just, instead of having one row for every time an artifact is used, it just has one row per artifact, per column or measure. That's the difference. But this is basically this local analysis. This was the first thing we built for Measure Killer to analyze a single report or data set. And then we quickly realized that, well, it might be nice to have, but the shared data sets, those are really the ones making a difference, right? Because currently, how do you analyze those? Especially if you have them up in the Power BI service, people build reports on top of this. You just don't know anymore which parts of your data set are in use in any of the reports in your Power BI tenant, and which things are actually nobody needs, and maybe you can cut down the size of your data set. And that's what we started building then, and it's already there. So this is basically cleaning up your tenant also, and that's where the second and the third mode of Measure Killer come into play. The second one is free to use, so this is still part of the free features, but the third one is the paid upgrade. And the difference is here you need to have all files locally. So whatever you want to analyze, it could be like a shared data set, right? You need to download it to your machine, and you need to find and download all the connected reports also download it to your machine, and then you can analyze it here in Measure Killer. I'm just gonna show this quickly. Now it's actually connected to this report. I have to close this. Just have to open my data set, and maybe let me just quickly show. So here, for example, we could have a data set that is pulling some data from, in this case, it's a weather API, and then there are reports built on top of this. Yeah. And of course, it could also be that somebody built reports in a different workspace. I can see this here in the impact analysis, but this is only what I have access to with my user account. That's why here it says more workspaces with limited access. So there is apparently something built on top of this dataset in a workspace where I don't have access to. And that's something we will show at the end in the admin mode that Klaus will present. But here in the UI, we just see everything that is built where I personally have access to in our Power BI tenant. And so if I want to use the free feature, I need to download this data set. I already have it open, so this is just a data set here. You can see that there's no report, right? It's empty. But then I downloaded a couple of those thin files of those report with live connections, and I have them. I have them in here, basically rain report, wind report, temperature, and maybe we can take a look at the weather in Belgium. Oh, 23% of rain today in Brussels. We only have Brussels data apparently. Anyway, so we just built some reports here on top of the weather data set. And yeah, so if you want to analyze this, you need to have everything locally. So you need to download everything. And now I need to open the data set. Yeah. I start second mode. I select my, I have to, second. Because if you launch Measure Killer from within this external tools ribbon, the port is kind of hard-coded into it. And in the other, if I just started outside of Power BI, I can always choose which port I want to select. And that's always the file that is currently open on my computer. So I choose this. And then what I need to do is I need to add a couple of files. I need to add the dataset first, again, the file, yeah. And then I can add those reports with live connection, yeah. And I can either add them one by one, basically just selecting here, or I can add the whole folder, which is what I'm gonna do now, because it's easier. I'm just gonna select, I'm gonna put all of them here, and you can see it says this is the data set and those are the reports. And then I can go to submit, just double checking if I really meant this to be the data set. And then I can click on yes. Now when I click on run, it will analyze the data set and those 3 reports, and it will tell me if everything in my data set is used in some of the reports, or as you can see those red entries, some stuff is not used at all in none of the reports I have selected. So basically here, this would be my potential to optimize my data set in case I'm sure that only those 3 reports have been built on top of it. And what is interesting here is we also get so-called report level measures, right? Users can build measures on top of a dataset in their thin files, in those Power BI reports that have a live connection to a dataset. I can add measures on top of the dataset, and those will also show up here. I will not be able to remove those because they're part of the thin file, but at least I'm aware that somebody built something. And in the output, in the Excel output, I would also see the DAX expression that this person used to build this measure. So that's why here you can see almost all the artifacts belong to the dataset, but then some belong, for example, to this rain report, to the temperature report, or even to the wind report. So we have report level measures in all of those thin files. And then here, of course, I can also sort. And since I have the file open locally, I can remove stuff directly. So that's the offline and free version, basically, the second mode of Measure Killer. And then the third one, which is in a lot of cases the best one, I would say at least the most convenient one, is the online analysis. So here, I don't need to have anything open. I can just authenticate with my Microsoft account, and then Measure Killer will basically get a list of workspaces. And here it's important to know that this must be a premium workspace. So since we will do an XMLA connection on that Power BI dataset, XMLA is a premium feature. So we need to have either a PPU or a premium capacity. And that's why we filter out all the other workspaces. So here I have to find, or I have to tell Measure Killer which workspace I want to take a look at. And in our case, this data set that we have is located in the MK workspace. So I'm going to choose MK here, and then I'm going to hit data sets. And now it's giving me all the data sets in that workspace. And I am interested in this weather data set. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to click on connect. And now it's doing this XMLA connection, and I have to authenticate again. This is a different authentication, so that's why we have to do it twice. And now I get a list of workspaces. In this case, though, it's a list of all the workspaces, so also the non-premium workspaces, because somebody could have potentially built a report on top of this weather dataset also in here. So now I can say, okay, which workspaces do I want to search? So Measure Killer will now search for all the reports in the workspaces I select for connected reports. So reports built on top of this weather dataset. And I can take out some, for example, I don't care about my test and dev workspaces. I'm just going to take those out. Here's a training, testing, internal, etc. I just take out a few, but the rest, maybe I'm going to say, okay, let's see if we can find something. And I'm going to hit reports. And now it's showing me all the reports that it found in those workspaces, all the ones built on top of this data set. And we can see here, most of them are in the MK workspace, but then there's also this you can't download me report that is in the Measure Killer workspace. Yeah, so Francois is asking, what if I don't have access to one of the other workspaces? That currently in this version, you need to have access. So in this version, it's not perfect yet, I would say, because yeah, you need to have access with your user. And if you have a large tenant, it's tough, right? That's why we built this admin mode that Klaus will show once I'm done here, where we basically search the whole tenant, no matter what, no matter who has access to what. We'll just search everything. But currently in this version, you still you can only search what you have access to. The difference is just that you can do this with a normal user account. And the other thing, you need to be a tenant admin, right? And yeah, maybe we're not tenant admins all the time, so it really depends. So the other thing would be for the admins, and that's basically what we built in this new version that will come out in 1 or 2 weeks. So here I just see everything that all the workspaces I have access to, yeah. And then what is also important to remember is that some reports cannot be downloaded. What does that mean? There's some limitations. You can also see this. There's a link to Microsoft. So, for example, if I have this data set here, and then I go to my Measure Killer workspace, and here I'm going to build a report in the browser. Some people might do this, yeah, but it's rare, I would say. And now, if I choose, for example, this weather data set, if I build a report in the browser on top of a data set in a different workspace, you cannot download it. And we need to export or download those reports, those thin files, in order to analyze them. So everything that you cannot download through the UI is also something that Measure Killer cannot analyze. That's very important, yeah. It's not that much, and I think they're always making it easier and easier to export reports. But still, there are some reports that for various reasons cannot be downloaded. And then it just means that Measure Killer cannot analyze that. And this one is one of them. Yeah, this one is a report built in the browser on top of a data set in a different workspace. And I just want to show you. So you could also take this out or take the you can with you can just hit delete and you can take out some, or you can decide to keep all of them in. I just want to show what happens if there's a report that cannot be downloaded. So let's just run this and see what happens. It's just double checking. It will do a couple of API calls because for every report it has to do one API call. And here, of course, also it's very important to understand that those are all reports that have a live connection, so they don't contain any data. So it's all metadata that is being analyzed. I'm going to say continue, and now you can see here in this little window that step by step it's exporting those reports, and this depends on your tenant, internet speed. The API calls are not really fast, I would say. Sometimes they go quite quickly, sometimes they take longer. It's kind of weird. And now it hit this "you can't download me" report. And yeah, it just cannot. It says it cannot find it, it cannot download it. And that's why now we have the option to skip this one because yeah, there's no way we cannot do anything with this. So I'm going to say skip, and now it's done because this was the last one. And it will run its analysis on top of those 5 reports plus the data set. And it will tell me which parts of my data set are not used in any of the reports I selected. And maybe then I can start cleaning up my data set and remove artifacts from it because nobody's using them. And everything else is here, basically. So we can see this average temperature measure is used in the data set in a calculated table. It's a parameter. Then we can see it's used in a measure in the temperature report. We can see it's used in a visual in the temperature report on the page tooltip. And then again on tooltip DM page, it's used there again. And it's used in the wind report in an area chart on the tooltip page. So we can see for every artifact, which is kind of cool, right? Because maybe I'm interested in one specific column and I can find that column and say, okay, tell me everywhere this thing is used. City, Stadt, city column is used in 2 relationships and in 1 calculated table. So that's how I can just go through it and check all those things. And then if I go to filter unused, now of course I can maybe sort and start removing things. Of course here, since I did the online analysis, I don't have anything open. My Power BI file is still in the Power BI service. I cannot remove it automatically, just impossible. But I could create a C# script and I could execute that maybe in a tool, or I can just make sure next time I deploy my model, I take out these measures. And for the columns, it's the same thing as before. I can get the M code, for example, and I can just copy paste this into the Power Query if I have my dataset open, or I can do anything else with it, whatever I prefer. Okay. Any questions?
Currently is one question. What if you don't have access to one of the other workspace which is consuming my data set?
Oh, yeah, I think I already answered that. It's currently in this version. Yeah. In this version, it's not possible yet, right? But maybe it's good for Klaus now to show what is still to come, because we're very excited about this, and yeah, that will come out in 10 days or so.
That will answer the questions. And I just wanted to ask, how is my audio? Is everything all right?
Yeah.
Can you hear me well? Perfect. I will just start sharing then. So basically, you can see that I will run from Visual Studio Code. We're still testing it, but I will try to address both of the questions, the exports and what if you don't have access to workspaces, right? So I will use the same data set as Gregor. So basically, I know because I published it that I have some reports on a workspace called PPU test. And I don't have this, I don't have access to this workspace. So what if, right? What if I don't have access? I can use the new version. Of course, it will come out in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, maybe, hopefully 2 weeks. And let's use it. It's very similar, but you will see some stuff different. So the same thing exactly. You can see now that I have this PPU test here because I'm using admin calls, but I will analyze the M case, the same weather data set as Gregor used. So I will connect. Let me just sign into my XML endpoint, and I will see that we have tons and tons of workspaces here. What I will do, I will just run once, and let's see what Measure Kilo finds. Just wait a little. Oh, and now we have now we have another temperature report. We have another you can't download me. This will not be able, Measure Kilo will not be able to export, and some other, the same ones that we found before. And you can see here that we have another button that didn't show before. Now we added some new features that you can analyze. We can use Measure Kilo with Analyze in Excel. For example, this guy right here, it's an awful Excel file. I'm sorry about that, but I'm importing stuff from this weather data set. And it's just a pivot table, very simple, nothing fancy. And I can see here that the actual wind speed is used there. I will show you to you guys later. So I can add this file locally. It's kind of a hybrid mode. So of course, now we don't have to add one by one. And you can see here that we have some paginated reports as well. So what I will do, instead of going open, we added this drag and drop feature, which is way cooler, right? Just drag and drop and click apply. Now let's see here. It's the same thing. Only that I don't have access to this PPU test, right? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have access to the forgotten workspace. Yes, I don't, which is we have an abandoned report in the forgotten workspace, which is connected to this data set. So I will just run. Let's see what happens now. It will be a little bit different. We changed the why, we improved the user experience a little bit, but let's just run.
Maybe before you run it, it's also, I think good to see that you can see in the main table on the bottom right that we also have now, we differentiate between Power BI reports and paginated reports. So before we were only able to analyze Power BI reports automatically, and basically you don't have to download them or anything. And now in this new version, we can also analyze paginated reports that live in the Power BI service.
It's a
But
very good
this
point.
add files, what Klaus showed, is basically an extra thing. For example, for analyzing Excel, people will not really upload them to a Power BI service probably. But if you want to keep them in, if you just say, oh, there is a finance Excel report, somebody built something on top of this dataset, you can just drag and drop them on top of whatever you found online, and basically add that to your analysis.
Exactly. It's a hybrid mode, that, well, as we like to call it. Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. I totally forgot about that. But now we will automatically detect paginated reports. Of course, analyzing Excel is impossible to do. It doesn't reside on the Power BI service, so we have to add it manually. But it's better than nothing, right? So I wish to continue. Of course, here we have a little summary of what we selected. And if I click on yes, then another message box will appear saying Measure Killer will provide my user with access to two workspaces, the PPU test and the forgotten workspace that I don't have access to. Do you want to continue? Obviously, I want to continue, and now it's done. Now, there is a problem because it takes a little bit of time to refresh the user permissions. So we added a little countdown, kind of, that will wait, or you can click on refresh users, but it will fail because I didn't, I refreshed it a while ago. So now what I'm doing, I'm exporting the reports, and you can see that you can download me, return an error. So I can skip it. We had a little more detailed error message. So if somebody finds any problem with Measure Killer, they can print the screen, send it to us, and you can analyze better. So let's, I want to skip this item. I cannot download it, just skip. And now I'm exporting the temperature, the rain. It will take a little while. Done. Actual weather, humidity, weather data set, that's and now I hit the second, you can't download me. And again, I cannot download it, just skip. And okay, now it's finished. Measure Killer is ready. Now, do you want to remove the access granted to the workspace? You can say either yes or no. If you say yes, obviously, Measure Killer will remove the access from the workspaces. It just gave it to the user. So basically, I will say yes. And now the analysis will run as before. So let's just wait a while. My computer is a little bit slower than Gregor's. So basically now we have the exact same thing with one additional thing. I'm removing the access that Measure Killer just gave, but note that sometimes it can take a little bit of time. So if I refresh here on my tenant and I go to workspaces, let me just try to find PPU, I still have PPU, right? But if I refresh again, probably, yeah, I don't have access anymore. So it takes a little bit of time to do this user permission refresh. And I want to address another question, the previous question about the exports. Now, of course, we have the row by row export here, but we added this new advanced console functionality where we can export basically a lot of things. Now, imagine that for some reason, I just want to see the filters. I can say to Measure Killer, show me filters. Now it will create this new view where I can see the artifacts only used in filters. I mean, the visual level filters. But what if I want to only see, I don't know, I want to only see the measures I'm analyzing. So show measures. Now Measure Killer will show me only measures. This is a new feature, obviously. It will come out in this new version. So we try to add a lot of stuff to this new version. And this is and of course you can save to So let's say filters, no typos. And then this file dialog will appear. I would just say filters, and then it's saved. Then I can go to my desktop and I can see it's exactly the same table, but with a lot more detail. And of course, there is a lot of commands. We're still adding new commands, so we can click help, and then you'll see a whole list of commands here that you can add. So you can create this huge documentation. That's the whole point of this new feature, especially. So clear. Anything that I missed? Of course, there will be a lot of new features in this new version, so I hopefully you guys can check it out.
Yeah, great. I think the number of users is also something new. You have that in your table here. That didn't exist in the version I showed. It would just show how often is something used, right?
Oh, exactly. And I can, oh yeah, I totally forgot. And you guys can see that here I'm having some Excel fields, usability, and as I showed you guys in the Excel, I'm only using this measure actual wind speed on this Excel file. So you can see here that I have only one use, and it is on the Excel file. And we add the extension at the end so we can differentiate between the names, but that's it. Oh, and for example, we have the number of users at the end of the table. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's used 4 times across the tenant and across the local files, obviously. And we can also, of course, now we can, I'm running the online analysis, but we can automatically kill calculated columns and hide all the unused columns. So if you publish your report or data set or both, then the hidden columns will be not visible for the consumers of the users of the dataset that will try to create thin files with it, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
Or is
I mean, it was I think somebody gave us this feedback that instead of removing the columns, maybe I want to hide the unused columns. And we thought, hey, it's a good idea, and that's why we added it to this version.
Yes.
By the way, if you have used it and you want to give us feedback, there's a section on our website, on our blog. I just put it in the chat. That's where we collect all the feedback from everyone. So yeah, but I think it would be also interesting to hear from some of you. Have you used this tool before? What is your verdict? Maybe you can share some light. Anybody who has heard of it or used it?
And then we had complete silence.
Now everybody is waking up again.
The suspense.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you can give it a try. Like I said, it's you can just get it from our website. But yeah, if you have a good use case, I mean, personally, I would run this on top of all my large data sets in the Power BI service because it's interesting to see what you find, right? It's a lot of times it's very surprising how much you can actually get rid of. And yeah, maybe it will help you reduce your model size and even maybe reduce the load on your Power BI premium capacity. That would be the really, I think, nice to have if you can have this effect basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we actually had the first response. Well, first time I see it, but seems promising. Looking forward to test it. I see a lot of use cases. Yeah, me as well, actually. No, and then one question: which license or pricing will be applied for the to the tenant analysis?
Yeah. So let me just share. So we also have this pricing section on the website, and it just says here that most features are free to use personally or commercially. It basically means if you don't have a license, you will see those two things, and you can use whatever you want personally or commercially. You can do with it whatever you want. But then you can add a license key here, and this will unlock this third mode, and also the fourth one that Klaus showed, this Power BI tenant admin mode, is basically is part of this paid version. And we have 3 different licensing models. Measure Killer Basic is for small organizations. It's premium per user only. So if you have a premium capacity, you need to go for the enterprise version. So that is like 200 euros per year. The enterprise version is like 1,000 per year. And like I said, this is premium per user. This is premium capacity. And then we also have this for consultants. Actually, this is we just added this a few months ago because we realized that a lot of consulting companies really like this because they can analyze stuff in their client's tenant. And there it's basically 550 per year per user, and then you can basically get a number of licenses that you need for your team, for example. And yeah, so that's basically this online and tenant and the admin mode that Klaus showed. For those things, you would need to buy a license from us.
Okay. If there are no more questions, we'll just give them a couple of more minutes. But
Sure.
I don't see any more questions coming in. I would like to thank you for joining us today. And I learned a lot. I already saw parts of it during the presentation of Klaus back in February, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
But yeah, no, really cool things.
And if somebody works for an organization, company, whatever, and just says, hey, I don't really know yet if this is really going to help us, I would like to try it out, send us an email. We can get you a trial license. It's no problem. It's always good to test things before you jump in the cold water and pay for it. So that's entirely possible. Cool.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I don't see any questions coming in. So thank you very much for joining us. To all attendees, thank you for joining us as well. And I, of course, hope to see you again in September. Bye-bye. Enjoy the summer break.
Thank you for hosting, Olivier. Bye.
Thank you. Nice seeing
Bye-bye.
you, by the way. Thank you for the everything.
Bye.